Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar briefing. The Jerusalem Press Club has the honor to partner up with Israel's most renowned security think tank, the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. For those unfamiliar from abroad, the INSS conducts innovative, high-quality research that shapes the public discourse of issues on Israel's national security agenda and provides policy analysis and recommendations to decision makers, public leaders, and the strategy community, both in Israel and abroad. For several decades now, Israelis have rung the alarm bell on Iran's intentions in the Middle East, though the long arm of the Islamic Republic stretches far beyond the Jewish state. Just yesterday, Israel allegedly targeted an Iranian cargo ship affiliated with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the United States, meanwhile, officially resumed its efforts to re-enter the nuclear accord with Iran, as the issue of sanctions imposed by the former administration remain a stumbling block. Today we will discuss why the prevention of an Iranian bomb is not the only problem that lies ahead, and hear from three researchers with expertise in the field about another imminent threat, the next war in the north. Last month, the INSS concluded a 2-year project examining this issue thoroughly. Its findings are chilling and recommendations important to hear. I'll just introduce the speakers first. Brigadier General in Reserves, Uri Dekel, is the Managing Director of the INSS. He has vast experience in the fields of intelligence, international military cooperation, and strategic planning. He headed the Israeli team to negotiations with the Palestinians at the Annapolis Summit. Prior to this, he filled many senior IDF positions, including head of the Foreign Relations Division, and in the Air Force, commander of the Foreign Relations Unit, and head of the Research Division. His last IDF post was head of strategic planning. Lieutenant Colonel retired Orna Mizrahi heads the Next War in the North project at the INSS and is a senior researcher. Mizrahi held a long career in the Israeli security establishment, where she specialized in intelligence research and strategic planning processes in the IDF and for the political echelon. She served in the research department in the Intelligence Corps and the Strategic Division of the Planning Directorate, moving to the National Security Council at the Prime Minister's office, where her last position was Deputy National Security Advisor for Foreign Policy. And our third speaker is Brigadier General in Reserves, Yuval Bazak, an expert on defense strategy and military doctrines and a senior consultant to the Doctrine and Training Department of the IDF's General Staff's Operations Director. In Reserves, Bazak serves as the Chief of Staff of the Galilee Division, which operates on the Lebanese front. During his years in the IDF, he commanded the Samaria Brigade, the Helmond Brigade, and the Golani's 51st Battalion. His last position in the IDF was Defense Attaché to the Central European. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here and for hosting us at the JPC. Before we begin, just a technical note. For those of you joining who would like to send questions in real time, please do so in the chat box on Zoom, and we will do our best to get to them. So let's just begin with a little bit of background on the project itself. As we have seen this week, despite the most recent incident, global attention concerning Iran mostly is focused on the nuclear program. So why then is the INSS focusing on its other ambitions in the region in the context of this study? And Orna, I'd love for you to begin, please.
Thank you for having us. Well, I'll start by remind what you have just said about the fact that we have started the research, this study early 2019. And we felt at that time that although the Iranian nuclear program is one of the high priority threats that we are dealing with, that there is another threat that is developing at that time and nowadays on the conventional military threat on the northern front, that we have to address it. And that was the reason why we have decided to start this study. Now, it was based on the understanding of a few assumptions that I would like to present now. The first was that, as I said, there is a conventional threat that is developing, and we have to address it. And the second is that the next war on the Northern Front is going to be a different one. It is going to be different than its previous, because it wouldn't be just a war between Israel and Lebanon. It's going to be a war between Israel and the entire Shiite axis, because of the changes in the strategic environment and the battlefield as well. So we have to address it. So I said it's going to be a different war, and we decided that we are going to deal with the worst case scenario, because Israel has to quit. The purpose of this memorandum that we have written and the study was to help the decision-making echelon, the decision makers in Israel and the security establishments. So we thought that it will be better if we will deal with the worst case scenario. So we will be prepared for the worst of all. And this is and so we were focusing on the wide-scale war, but it's not saying that we think that this is what is going to happen. It's not. We are not dealing with the likelihood that it will erupt, but we are dealing. We took the worst-case scenario and decided to work according to that and see the implication of it for Israel. And the last one is about the fact that we thought that we have to look ahead, a decade ahead, 10 years ahead, to see, because there are going to be changes. If now we say that the chances to have a wide-scale war are low, it can develop and it can be changed. So we have to look ahead and see what are the changes and be prepared for them.
Okay, thank you.
May I add something? Because the main idea that everybody look at Iran upon the issue of the nuclear and maybe the ballistic missiles. But there is nothing discussing in the international community, and we have international dialogue with the institute like us and strategic dialogues with foreign ministries. And every time when we raise the issue of consolidation of Iran in our northern arena, building up the military machine in order to attack Israel by missiles, by attack UAVs, all the kind of missiles, and now they produce precise capabilities which they can hit strategic targets inside Israel. For many fronts, we are not speaking only about Lebanon. It's Lebanon, it's Syria, it's Western Iraq, and even supporting Hamas in Gaza. And they are building up and determined to build up those capabilities, even the crisis and even the coronavirus and even the economic crisis in Iran and the maximum pressure of the American administration, Trump administration. They are determined to proceed in building up those capabilities. And today, the main focus is how to change Syria, because they try in Syria to build up local, internal militias with the Iranian guidance, training, equipment, and they are going to use them again against Israel. So
this is very important, because what I'd like to know is I live in a country where things seem very calm right now on our northern borders. So what's really happening on the ground as you see it?
As I started to say, for example, they build up units inside Syria. They would like that Syria will be in the end state as Lebanon and as Iraq. In Lebanon, they have the Hezbollah, which is the main force in the monopoly of the power of Lebanon is Hezbollah. And in Iraq, the same situation, that they build up what we call the PMU, the local Shia militias, which they keep the monopoly of the power, and they can use them anytime when they decide that this is the time to attack the American forces, the international coalition, or Israel. And they do the same now in Syria. They build up those capabilities that they can use them against us, not only terror. I spoke about missiles, precise missiles, cruise missiles, attack UAVs, all those elements they would like one day to use them, and ground attack capabilities by those some kind of spatial units, which they can penetrate our border in the Golan Heights and the northern border with Israel, trying to take over villages, kibbutzim, our settlements in that area, and by that trying to change the reality. The main focus is to keep Israel in long-range engagement on the borders, that we will be all the time with problems along the borders, and by that they believe that we will not have time to deal with the main issue, which is Iran nuclear capabilities, on one hand, in order to deter us to do that, in order to deter us to do something against inside Iran.
And both of you mentioned briefly also in the Palestinian territories. What's the situation there like now in terms of Iranian
especially in Gaza, because in the West Bank we control in the security level, but in Gaza they support Hamas, Jihad Islamic Organization, and other groups. Iran support them to build up the same missiles, UAVs, and other elements that they can attack Israel the day that they can get the order from the Iranian that this is the time to do that.
Our assumption is that if there is a war, a wide-scale war, the Palestinians in Gaza will also, the Hamas and the others will also may launch missiles according to the order from Tehran.
Right, a multi-front.
So this is the worst case scenario that I was speaking about. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would like to dive a little bit deeply into the worst case scenario, but if we could just first talk about perhaps the prevention of the war, if we're able to do such a thing. Your memorandum talks about two alternatives that you examined to prevent this large-scale war. So we're seeing now that Israel obviously is acting where it needs to. We have, occasional strikes in Syria and sometimes other defense activities in Iran itself. How is Israel preventing the war currently? What is the current policy being set in place, Udi?
Okay. Israel have a concept that we have to keep what we call a long-term confrontation or continued confrontation with Iran in order to try to minimize their ability to build up the power that they would like to use against us. We call it the confrontation between the war, but this is continuous confrontation in order to, first of all, achieve deterrence, but second, to say that we determine not to give the Iran the opportunity and the possibility to build up the force and to change the arena as they like to do. And the third aspect of that, even if we lose the control of the escalation, we will be in better situation if there is any situation that we arrive to big confrontation and even a war with Iran and its proxies, we will be in better conditions to deal with them. So we have, we cannot be tired. We have all the time to act until something will change. Today, the main problem that Iran have the freedom of activity in Lebanon and in Syria and in Iraq, and they can do there whatever they like. Nobody tried to stop them from doing the things that they are doing there. Nobody tried to stop the consolidation process. And it's in many levels. We don't have time to elaborate about that. And this is the only problem of Israel. And you started with the issue of the Revolutionary Guard vessel in the Red Sea. The most important response of the US was that this is not us, this is Israel. Okay, nobody would like to go to any kind of engagement of tackle with the Iranians. This is the problem of Israel.
It's convenient that it's something else's problem.
And this is the problem of Israel. And the reason that we have to continue in that, in order not to give them the freedom of their activity. And I can tell you that there is a 3/4 success of the glass, which we prevented them from doing a lot of things that they wanted to do. But still there is the 1/4 that they proceed and they have pension and they have time and they have strategic view And they're determined to proceed in that process, and we have to be determined in the same way.
Very clear.
I want just to add another issue, because the role of national security actually is doubled. First is to put the scenario, the worst case scenario in front of us and to prepare. But second is to take care that those scenarios will never come to the war.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that putting 10 years as worst case scenario, it's not only say that this is what's going to happen. It's just a kind of a guideline to say we don't want to be there. And if we don't want to be there, we have to act now.
Sure.
This is something that is very important, and it lies under in our memorandum all of it.
Right. So the other alternative actually that you discuss in your memorandum to prevent an all-out war, a full-scale war, was to take some sort of preemptive action in the form of some military campaign. So I guess my question is two-part. A, what would this campaign look like? And B, how is such a campaign legitimate in international eyes? And does something need to be done to inform the international community of this kind of possibility in order for it to be acceptable to our allies? Orna?
Well, I'll start by saying that Israel wants to avoid war. It's very clear that we want to avoid war, but we could get to the point that we have no other chance. As Udi has just presented, Iran and Hezbollah are continuing their military buildup to have these very advanced military offensive capabilities that maybe Yuval later will talk about it. Yeah. So if they are continuing with that, and the campaign between what is not enough because it doesn't get its required results, because we succeed in just preventing or delaying the process, but they are continuing with this military buildup. So maybe we'll get to the point that we'll have no other chance but to do something. And what we thought that is better to recommend about is to do some very limited focused attack that will deal with the main problem that Israel is seeing now, that is the precision missile program. This is one of our main challenges, and that we look at it all the time, that they are trying to accumulate more and more precision missiles. And so maybe we'll get to the point that Israel will have to initiate such a strike, but it should be a very limited, focusing on these core capabilities that are aiming Israel, especially Israel civilian arena. And but you know, the main challenge of this alternative is that you can't control the scope or the duration of this campaign, and it can escalate to a full-scale war. So we have to take this as it's the main disadvantage and challenge, but maybe we'll get to the point that we'll have to do that. So this is one of the options that we have put, and we put also the advantages and the disadvantages for the decision makers to decide when and how to conduct such an attack.
I'm sorry, another time to add something which I'm sure that it's not clear enough. Iran deliver precise capabilities to actors which are proxies without any state responsibility. Those which are not taking into consideration all the consequences that come after a war situation. And some of them feel that they have toys, that they would like to use those toys. And now we have to wait and to see when and why they will use those toys against Israel. So there is numbers of missiles, arsenal of missiles, which can create major threat to Israel. And we have to prevent it. And if we see that they are coming to this number of missiles, I don't want to say the number, we have to do something. As Orna said, first of all, we are going to some kind of military activity against those capabilities, not against Lebanon, not against Syria, not
Very
against,
limited and
limited operation against those capabilities, and taking the risk that we will not control the level of escalation and we will find ourselves in war situation.
Okay, so in the event that neither of these alternatives work, the first being the campaign between the wars that Israel is trying to manage, and the second being a limited preemptive strike, perhaps Yuval, you can elaborate. What is the worst case scenario that we're looking at? What is this war? What will its damage and impact be to the parties?
First, I want to elaborate that after almost 5 decades, we are coping with a potential fundamental threat over Israel. It wasn't the case in the last 4 decades, and this is a major change in our national security perspective that we have to deal with. Now, it actually generated by the imperialist ambition of Iran. And now we have to understand that Iran clearly declare, and not only declare, pushing in full power the idea of establishment of a Shiite empire in the Middle East. Now, Israel is the main threat to Iran, the main obstacle. And Iran is actually building a force, a conventional force, in order to destroy Israel. And clear as and simple as it sounds. Now we are most of the time focusing in the nuclear, but I think the nuclear is mainly the part of the package that have to give the Iranian immunity. After seeing Saddam Hussein, after seeing Gaddafi, they know that if you want to promote your interest beyond your borders, you have to get an ammunition. So I think that this is the idea of the nuclear, but the main tool they are going to use in order to destroy Israel, or like we say, to shake the national security of Israel, it's by the conventional forces that they are building step by step. It started with Lebanon, now we see Syria, we see the takeover of Gaza, which is 100% now, maybe not 100%, but it's very much identified with Iranian interest. Now building, just imagine the mastermind is in Tehran, but the hands are already coming to our borders. They built a conventional state-like capabilities, which are built in order to attack Israel whenever they will decide that this is the time. It could be in 5 years, it could be in 10 years, it could be when they will feel that they have enough power to achieve their goals, or it could be because they have pressure from the strategic arena or from the inside Iran. Whatever the reason will cause it, they are actually planned to take all this power that they build and actually shoot it into Israel. It mainly built on massive, precise, but not only precise, even also statistic missiles from various distance, from various battleheads, so they could point out those power capability into what they seems like our weakness, the home front or the society of Israel. Like they said, Israel is very strong in its muscles, but the Israeli society is like the spider web that are very, let's say, weak and
maybe sensitive.
What?
Maybe sensitive.
It's sensitive, well, yes. And if we are going to press them, if we are going to shoot from all those frontiers together, those kinds of missiles, if we are going to destroy, and Israel is a very small country, so right now, potentially, they cover all the strategic assets of Israel. They actually covered our airports, our seaports, our electricity power station, everything. So being able to shoot together in parallel from three frontiers together into the home front of Israel, into the civilian of Israel, and actually to do two things: to destroy the capability or the ability of the war machine of Israel to move or to come to impress its power or to mobilize the forces to the frontiers and to go into the places that they are shooting from. This is one thing, and the second one is actually to hit the Israeli moral. And this kind of war, in their mind, could make a major damage to the Israeli self-security, to the Israeli image of itself. And this is kind of things that will shake the Israel national security. Now, another thing that, another element that they are working very hard in the recent years is that to build the assault forces, the ground attack forces. Mm-hmm. They already have it in the Hezbollah, 6,000
in the Golan Heights also.
And now they are starting to build it in the Golan Heights, and the idea is actually to conquer places in the Galilee, in the Golan, in order to create a front defense and keep their capabilities to shoot missiles into Israel. Actually, it's to defense against the Israeli maneuver, to actually keep the Israeli maneuver in the front line while they are keep shooting from the rare area of Lebanon and Syria and potentially Iraq, Gaza, and even from Iran into Israel. And this is the picture they see in their eyes. I must say that this is the picture that we have to prevent.
Of course.
And if we will have to cope with it, we are now actually building the capabilities in order to do so in an effective way.
So is Israel capable of defending itself on a multilateral attack? You've mentioned 5 different points of attack.
Theaters, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 5 different theaters. We never actually experience in such an issue. And this is why we say it's not going to be similar to the previous wars. It's not going to be similar to the Israeli-Arab wars. It's not going to be similar to the Israel-Hezbollah war or to the Israeli-Palestinian war. It's going to be different. And history, and Little Heart asked why we don't learn from history. What we are trying to do is to actually illustrate the future, trying to create the worst case scenario as it might be, and like I say, in 2 ways: first, try to prevent it, and second, try to build the capabilities to cope if the time will come.
Can I add just one sentence about the ground attack? I think that it's very important for them because it's symbol. If they succeed to conquer even, a very small part of Israeli territory in the 67 lines, it's a great achievement. It's a great symbol that you have done something that never occurred. So I think that they are investing
put the flag in the middle
to put the flag on the northern of
Israeli settlement, to put the flag.
So they put enormous effort.
This is the image of win.
Yeah, this was the purpose of the tunnels, but now they don't have so much the tunnels, but they are still continuing with this maneuvers to try to conduct such an attack.
Okay, let's move on a little bit to what kind of impact this war would actually have. Who would most suffer from this development? Perhaps Israel's response. What would that look like, and what would the region be left with at the end of the day?
Before you are saying,
okay.
I would like to say something, because this is one of the purpose of this work, because the response of the Israeli side will create a lot of damage on the other side of the border. And we have to remember something that I'm not sure that everybody understands. If you are a young couple in Lebanon and you would like to purchase a house for your family, so what you are doing, you're going to Hezbollah and ask them to aid you in order to build up the house. They said, okay, we will assist you to build up the house, but one room is for us. And one room this is the room with the missile launcher. Inside the house, in the indoor area, and all the villages in southern Lebanon and in other places in Lebanon, we have a good picture in Israel. Most of them not full picture, but good picture. They took the urban area and created as a launching position against Israel. So what we have to do, this is for us a military locations. We have to destroy them. So there will be a lot of collateral damage on the other side of the border. And our Chief of General Staff said that in our institute annual conference 2 months ago, that there will be a lot of damage in Lebanon because we have to destroy those missile launchers or the other things which they are using from this area. And this is something you have to understand. They are not only using a weapon against civilians in our side, they are using.
Hello?
We call it human shields. They are using the population as human shields.
רגע, זה קשור אלינו?
לא.
אנחנו באמצע...
אני לא עשיתי רעש, אתה זה שמפריע, לא?
Okay. So this is the main idea. They are attacking civilians and using civilians as the human shield. So in that case, the casualties and the collateral damage, we will try to, of course, to try to limit it, but there will be another picture on the other side of the border, and somebody have to understand. So this is one issue. The other issue is how the ability to stop. What kind of exit strategy you have when you start a war situation. And now we are in situation that there is no really, maybe something will change, but there is no really international community. There is no any international capabilities to say to those actors, enough is enough. In the Middle East, everybody understands the language of power, the language of damage. People don't understand diplomatic language in order to solve the problems. So there is also the problem how we can, even there is now, it's a war situation, how we can stop it.
So what is our exit strategy?
What is our exit strategy? Yes. And maybe Yuval, you can say something. One of the things that we don't like to do, but in any case we will have to do, is what we call a ground operation inside the territory of the other side, running in the direction of the capitals, which saying that we are not playing any game. We are going to the middle of the problem. And it will change dramatically the reality all around.
In simple words, our response has to be destructive and doing it very fast. So the international community will have to interfere and try to do something about it.
Very clear. I'll just say that in Israel, our spare room is reserved for bomb shelters to defend our civilians and not for attacking purposes. I know that Orna already mentioned that you don't want to talk about the likelihood of this all-out war from occurring, and you've mentioned, 5 years, 10 years, just so that we can have something in our heads, but it's not actually a date. So I won't ask you what the likelihood of this happening is or how much time we are looking at, but what I will ask is what catalysts do we have on the ground? Maybe it's the missiles you mentioned, or what are the developments that could happen here for this large-scale war to occur?
Well, we put in the memorandum, we talked about the possibility of initiating the war by one of the sides, and we think that nowadays is not really an option. Maybe if Israel is going to a very focused preemptive attack. But the second group of triggers comes from the possibility of escalation or deterioration or miscalculation of one of the side. You have said before that the northern border is calm. It's not. Our northern border is not calm, especially because of the continuous of the military buildup of Hezbollah, and we had some incidents along the northern border along the last 1 or 2 years. And you have to remember that Hezbollah is still trying to revenge what they say that we have tried to do to them. We killed one of the activists in one of the attacks that they said that Israel was doing it in Syria, and now they want to revenge. The fact is that they are more contained lately because of the bad situation in Lebanon, but it can be changed. And Nasrallah is talking all the time about his strategic patience, that he can wait and we can retaliate in later on. So there is no calm, there is tension on the northern border. The IDF is there and is very much ready for surprises. And we have to take into account the possibility of deterioration. This is one about the relation between Israel vis-a-vis Hezbollah. But I think that what is going on the northern front also is used by Iran, because it's a leverage for Iran to advance its interest in the region. And Udi was talking about it earlier, about what Iran wants to achieve. Even, it's a leverage to what is going on the talks about the nuclear agreement. So it's on the table all the time, the possibility, and the capabilities are there. So the possibility that it will occur is there. We think that the chances that it will happen in the near future are very low, but we have to take into account the possibility that it will happen.
I always mentioned to ourselves that the 12th of July 2006 started as a beautiful blue sky days, very quiet, and it ended up with a full-scale war at the same day. Wars never have a date on the diary. They are just erupt. Sometimes it's because one of the sides have intentions let's say, have a situation that push it into the initiative of a war. And sometimes it's just a miscalculation or a escalation. And we are not very far from those scenarios. Last summer, we experienced two attack of Hezbollah that luckily they didn't succeed. But if they would succeed, I guess that the reaction of Israel was a massive one, and it could very easily go into an escalation and even into a war. So, on the one hand, we have to prevent the conditions that will bring Iran to the decision to go into war, and part of it sometimes is a friction with the capabilities build up of Iran that are creating the potential escalation that could bring us to a war. And it's a very, it's a kind of a risk management that we are doing, and nobody give us the promise that it will end up as we want.
Does Iran or its proxies have an interest for such a war? There's a conception worldwide now that there is no interest. Is this
not
true?
Now? Look, right now they want to actually gain more power. Now they feel that they are not the strong side. So you never go to a war if you are the weak side. And I guess that, and I think that right now, when Iran look at the balance between Israel, US, and itself and its proxies, it still feels that they are not in the place that where they can achieve their goals. But the ambition to build up the force, the ambition to change the balance could bring them to the point that they will be or feel enough confidence in order to go into a conflict.
There is two elements. The first one, which Iran tried to build up capabilities in order to deter Israel from attacking Iranian nuclear facilities inside Iran. So they believe if there will be a lot of capabilities that they can attack Israel inside Israel by all its proxies, that will prevent us from attacking the nuclear facilities in Iran. Or if we attack the nuclear facilities in Iran, they have the ability to respond, because in the Middle East, you must respond. This is the problem of the dynamic of the escalation. Even nobody would like to escalate the situation to war, but you have to respond to the other side. This is one issue. The second issue, which is more important, and that's one of the reasons behind that project, that Iran also build up capabilities in order, they would like to see that Israel is bleeding along of our borders, that we are all the time in frictions in our borders, that we will not have time even to deal with the problem of the nuclear inside Iran, because we have all the time to deal with the problems along the borders. And this is one of the things that they are built up now. And we have to be ready for that. And of course, we have to decide if we are playing their game or we will create another game. And one of the issues that's important for us, because in any case, when you arrive to war situation, we would like to shape better reality the day after. So what is better reality in the Middle East? How you can describe the better reality in the Middle East? When you see the situation in Lebanon, which is not any functioning country, how you can make Lebanon functioning country? When you look upon Syria, which is not also functioning country, how you take Syria out from the Iranian hands and build something positive there. The same in Iraq. We spoke about Western Iraq. So it's very difficult, and this is the issue which we are saying, why we don't see any positive outcome from war, because after the war, we don't see that we can shape better reality in this region.
Maybe less threats on Israel. Less threats.
Mm-hmm. And this is the case. You know, right now there is the trend of the ambitions of Iran that generate the situation, the geopolitical issues in the Middle East. And you see now the axis of conflict is between Sunni and Shia, and Israel is the moderate Shia side. And of course, right now, everybody is focused on how to stop or how to eliminate this threat that Iran is determined to keep pushing forward. And the question of what could be the impact of this war is a very, again, nobody could predict what would Europe look like after the Second World War, but everybody knew that they have to cope with a Nazis threat. And this is something that we learn along the history. And I think war, and this is why we are doing everything to prevent or to not coming to the point that we will have to fight, not because we want, because we understand the consequence. And but on the other side, Israel, whenever it stood against a fundamental threat or existential threat, it coped with it, and the Israeli society, and I think that this is something that Hezbollah in Iran don't really understand. The Israeli society could go far away to achieve peace. Sometimes in the Middle East, it looked like a weakness. But Israel, when it stood against a threat, existential threat, were most of the time unified and strike back very strong. I think that the Iranians are going to make the mistake of the Arab world in the previous in the Arab-Israeli conflict. But again, the war, and this is something that Udi say, will be all-out war from the Israeli side. We are going to strike because when our homes are threatened by missiles, when our strategic assets are threatened by missiles. There is no proportionality that we have to take care in order to fight back. And I think in this case, because Hezbollah and in Gaza also, they build their facilities inside the civilian area. And Hezbollah itself built inside the Lebanese war state. It will, the idea of striking and making damage, collateral damage, it's something that we will not be able to avoid. On the other hand, I think that if Syria, because we understand that we don't want to destroy Syria and we don't want to destroy Lebanon, we want to liberate them from the Iranian hold. And this is something that if we say that on the one hand we have to act very powerful, on the other hand we will have to make it wise in order to that after the war we will have liberate Lebanon that might be developed to another state, and the same for Gaza and the same for Syria. And this is something that we have to put on the table.
Okay, there are a few things that we'd like to get to before we finish because we are running out of time. One of the reporters is asking something specifically on what you touched, Yuval, which is how Israel can better improve its home front preparedness. Mm-hmm. What can be done?
So we have actually two systems, the active defense and the passive defense, and Israel is well organized. And we have to say Israel is very much, I think we are the most advanced state in the world, being able to cope with those, be able to cope with those threats. And from the spare room in your house, built upon concrete, till the anti-missile system that we have. But I think that in this case, in this kind of threat, we will not be able to avoid a massive maneuver in order to stop this missile launching. And this is part of the things that we have to take under consideration.
Very clear. I think the last issue that I'd like to discuss with you is really how current events might be encouraging Iran to continue these kinds or even increase these kinds of activity. If, for instance, we're looking at the fact that the United States is now officially returning to talks with Tehran regarding the JCPOA or some version of it, if we're looking at the fact that sanctions could be removed or changed in some way, are these activities that could maybe strengthen their confidence? Could this have some sort of impact on the other activities you've described?
Yes, for sure. First of all, we have to see now the situation that they are attacking everywhere in the Middle East, and nobody responds, only Israel. Nobody responds against the Iranian attacks in Saudi Arabia, in the American ones, the American forces. Every day there is some activity against the American forces in Iraq. Mm-hmm. Nobody responds for that. Yemen, which they are launching missiles, rockets, they can attack Israel from the southern part also, from this area with the long-distance cruise missiles, which they have there. And we know that they attacked other places nobody responds for that. They're attacking ships, vessels, nobody responds for that. So they believe that they can do, because this is the game. You know, the Iranian all the time checking what is the rule of the game. If there is no response, so we can do another stage in our activity. And this creates a risk of escalation. Israel cannot accept it, so Israel try to respond. Somebody tell us in the Middle East, we have new friends now in the Middle East, that they are saying that Iran afraid attacking Israel directly because they know that we will respond, not like Saudi Arabia and the others. I don't know. This is not insurance. So this is one element which it's very important to understand. Second, as we saw, you know, after the JCPOA and using moving the sanctions from Iran, they had a lot of money. What they did with that money? Do they build up Iran economy infrastructure or better situation for the Iranian people? They use that money in order to give to all the bad guys, all the proxies here in the Middle East. You know, in Syria, you can pay $100 for a person. He will fight for you. He will fight for you for $100. So now we see 30 new groups, militias in southern Syria, which the Iranians build up by Syrians, which they give them money. So if they have more money, they will build up more units like that.
You have to look at what's happening with Hezbollah. They had problems with getting the Iranian money because of the American sanction lately, the last 2 years. And now, if it will going to be changed, they will have it again and will be stronger inside Lebanon and will continue to build their capabilities, military capabilities with the Iranian money. And I think another point to say is, it's important to remind us what just have the Israeli military intelligence has published recently, that you have asked about deteriorating into a war, that the Hezbollah is willing and has intention to initiate a very short confrontation along the border in the next year. This is something that we have to take into account. And this, if Hezbollah, if they have more confidence when Iran is not under the sanction and Hezbollah is not under the sanction, Hezbollah also is under sanctions of the Americans. If they change their attitude towards Hezbollah, they can feel more confident that they can do such acts, and such acts can deteriorate the situation. And we'll get to the point that we want to avoid of having this full-scale war.
This is a big dilemma. One sentence. This is a big dilemma because on one hand, we know when we say loud and clear that the nuclear threat is the main threat. And it's better to focus upon the nuclear threat than the others. The priority of dealing with the nuclear threat is more important than the others. So we would like that everybody will concentrate in the nuclear issue and not bringing to the table other things. But on the other side, Iran played the game with the other elements, okay? So we cannot speak about nuclear without speaking about ballistic missiles, because the ballistic missiles warheads will be the platform for military nuclear capabilities. So we have to deal with that. Now everybody—
In the context of a new agreement or separately?
Of course.
But
because you cannot speak about the issue of Iran nuclear without the platform that delivery the bomb. I know that everybody is quiet because the supreme leader of Iran said that send a message to his people not more than 2,000 kilometers. Okay, it's not Europe. It's only Israel and other Middle East countries, not more than 2,000 kilometers. So this is an issue. So we said that in the current situation, it's better to focus upon there's fourth element with the nuclear deal that I hope that the international community will deal with the Iranian in that case. This is the sunset, this is the missiles, this is on the issue of the inspections, and especially dealing with the military dimension of that. But on the other hand, we can manage now the situation about the region, because if everybody is focused upon the issue of the nuclear, we can manage the issue, but not for the long term. Because as we said before, if Iran have more money, more ability, more freedom of action, and the legitimacy. Nobody's saying a word about the Iranian legitimacy to operate all over the Middle East. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
To unstable the Middle East.
This is an unprecedented issue. I think that not, like Udi said, Not many understand that the phenomenon of Iran is an unprecedented in the last decades in the geopolitical world. It's a state that won't actually acting, not only have the ideology, say that we want to be an empire, they are also building a capability to do so. And they also acting with those capability in order to achieve those or to promote this strategy. And all those things have to lead us to the conclusion that this is not a one-point effort, nuclear weapon program or whatever. This have to be a unified, international, in order to prevent war. In a war, Israel will stand and do whatever it needs to do. We don't want to beat them. And this is a kind of thing that the international community have to understand, because Iran is pushing the limits step by step. And we are going to achieve, if it's going to continue like this, we will go to reach the red line that we will not be able to stand it anymore.
Understood. I think this is also a very good place to close our discussion. You've left us, and I'm sure all the viewers, with a very bleak picture of the reality before us. But anyway,
you can read it.
Of course, so I was going to say the memorandum can be found on the INSS website, and of course, we're happy to share the link with everybody. First, I'd like to thank all of you for speaking with me today. Udi Dekel, Yuval Bazak, Ona Mizrahi.
Thank you.
And for the Institute for National Security Studies for hosting the Jerusalem Press Club for this very unique opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed that briefing by the Jerusalem Press Club. If you did, like the video and hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with all of our future content.